You're listening to Rookie Pirate Radio, the official anime and manga podcast for In Between Drafts. I'm John Negroni.
And I'm Travis Hymas.
And today we are doing a manga recap of One Piece chapter 1078. As usual, we will be discussing spoilers for the One Piece manga up until this chapter. So if you have not yet read 1078, be sure to do so right now for free on the Viz website. As usual, it's always available for about 3 weeks after the official release. You got some time, but I wouldn't wait too long, and we will link to it in the show notes as we do. And we want to hear from you, the listener. If you would like to add your own thoughts to the discussion, if you have a theory, some speculation, if you want to correct us, to put us in our place, you can always email us, rookiepirateradio@gmail.com, or you can also join our Discord server, hang out with us. We have a special channel dedicated just One Piece spoilers and discussion for the manga. All that info is in our show notes as usual. Can't wait to see you all there. Travis, how are you feeling after this chapter? I get the sense that, you're taking a deep mental breath after just everything.
Yeah, that's a really good way of putting it. We've had a lot of tension. We've had a lot of breath holding, a lot of buildup, and we're starting to release some of that. We're starting to exhale, and we're starting to head into the next stage of this arc. And we got our answer to our mystery, which we talked about last week. Hey, we need to see the end of this. We need to see if he can pull it off. I don't know how many extra twists we can handle. We don't have to do that. We know what's going on now.
We do. The stakes have been set, which is good. I think that, we couldn't have gone, another week without knowing who the traitor is. It would have been just too much. But let's get into the main beats of this chapter. I'm going to quickly recap what happened before we start to really dig in. And I got to say, of all the times, several times now I've done these main beats, this one took a while because funny enough, there is a lot that happens in this chapter. And when I first read it, I wasn't that taken aback by how much is crammed in there. It really just sort of felt like it was flying by for me. I think because I was like, okay, I know the traitor's coming. But then when I actually was reading the chapter again, just sort of be like, all right, let me take stock of here's everything that happened and here are the main things. It's a lot. So I'm going to go through it and hopefully I do it justice. I'm leaving stuff out, Travis. I can't even cover. We'll get into it eventually, but I'll do my best here. Let's go.
That's all we can ask for.
So like I said before, the title of this chapter is Escape Limit. And I do want to talk about what that means. But on the cover story, which appears to be wrapping up possibly this week, I wouldn't be surprised if this is the last we see of an emotionless excursion, sorry to say. We see Judge and Queen forming an alliance Judge and Caesar Clown forming an alliance and calling it Neo Mat. Although we also see Raiju and Ichiju in the background, they don't seem to care much. And then we go to Egghead. Stussy and Jinbei are on the move, and they inform Sentomaru that Admiral Kizaru is on the way and that the island needs to be evacuated. In the aftermath of Lilith and Usopp being turned to stone, Frankie, who is still half stone, challenges S-Snake right before she stomps on Pythagoras' head and apparently kills him just before an unseen character calls for her to wait and stop. Elsewhere in the lab, Atlas, Robin, and Chopper decide to head to a locked-up lab to try and find Vegapunk, while everyone else is fighting it out with the Seraphim and all that. Speaking of which, S-Shark is still fighting Sanji, who appears unfazed by his most recent punch, as Nami looks after an injured Edison, and Brook goes into his soul ghost mode thing to search the lab without having to deal with his body, which apparently is still injured. Back at Building A on the 4th floor, Luffy and Zoro continue to fight S-Hawk and S-Bear, but the flames on their backs refuse to go out, making their one weakness unattainable for the time being, although S-Hawk mysteriously vanishes, which Lucci surmises is an assassination tactic to go and pick off weaker targets, so Zoro and Kaku decide to pursue him, while Luffy and Lucci focus on S-Bear. And then we get something kind of interesting in this chapter. The narrator comes in. We haven't heard from the narrator in a little bit. And the narrator is speaking to us from the future. And I think this is the case where it's like Oda, so we can say he, I suppose. He comes in over a few panels of Bonnie weeping even more profusely than the last time we saw her, referencing a famous this egghead incident that is, of course, unfolding before our eyes, right before the story goes back in time 3 months ago to when this incident really kicked off. As the narrator explains, 3 months ago, the Vegapunk trader called the Gorosei and told them that Vegapunk was studying the Void Century, which we got a bit of a hint slash reveal last week. And the situation escalated to the point where the Cypher Pole groups, CP5, CP7, CP8, and so on, kept vanishing after going to investigate, despite them finding no evidence. We get a little more information about the gears of the world government's plan to assassinate Vegapunk, including a counterattack and the expectation of war, but also the unexpected arrival of the Straw Hat Pirates. The narrator says that the incident will resolve the following day and inflict a kind of shock the world never saw coming. And finally, the traitor is revealed at last, and is none other than York, the Vegapunk satellite for greed, who tells Vegapunk she's going to become a celestial dragon and will presumably take Vegapunk's place as the real Vegapunk. That was a lot, Travis. Like, that was a lot, right?
I'm surprised you put that much in there.
Well, it's hard because I was like, well, I can't just leave that out. That's like a pretty big, important thing. Like, we can't just, what? Oh boy.
All right, so I'm gonna give you your choice. Do you want to start with the cover story like usual, or do we want to go to the end? Because those are the two best starting points, I think.
Before we start with the cover story, I just kind of want to know real quick, drive by, slap on the wrist. Did you like this chapter overall? I want to know if you liked it. I'm worried. I'm worried that you didn't like it.
No, I liked it. If we're not going to get too much into the ending, because I have a lot to say about the ending.
Sure.
I think, again, this is that good transitional moment. We have our stakes. We have a quick explanation that, like, hey, it's time to really start paying attention. Things are going to get good. It's interesting. In our Discord earlier this past week, we had a little discussion going on about hype and anti-hype with One Piece and how that's very different now than it was 15 years ago.
It's a double-edged cursed sword.
It's a double-edged cursed sword, and it's kind of interesting because there's always these instances that I feel like Oda is actively seeking criticism and always working to adjust himself on this, because it's right at this moment where the gears are shifting again that we have the narrator coming in and just saying, hey, just so you know, we are going to amp up things. This is where we're going next. This is what the impact of that's going to be. It's kind of something different than we've seen for a lot of these incidents. They usually play out and then we learn the effects of them. Whereas this time we're going in and out of the, kind of in and out of order, basically. We still don't know exactly where Blackbeard is timeline-wise, etc. So I think it's Oda trying to adjust for those expectations, because this arc is going to go on a little bit longer than it originally seemed.
Which makes, I'm glad you said that. That makes me think that because the narrator has come in and that the traitor has been revealed, I'm thinking we're going to jump to like somewhere else. Like, I'm thinking we're going to go to like one of the other major things, whether it's Garp against Blackbeard, what's going on with Blackbeard and Law, what's going on at Elbaf with Kid and Shanks. Like, anything is on the table, because I think that he wants to sort of, like, if I have a criticism for this chapter before we get into it, it's that it repeats a lot of the same point, which kind of tells us that like Oda really wants to drill that down this week so that people don't really forget if we do move somewhere else next week. Even if we do sort of like a scene or two in Egghead and then maybe we go somewhere else, or maybe we go somewhere else and we end on Egghead, whatever it is, I think that he wants to really just, set those stakes and really repeat it over and over again, which, is fine. But it was just a little bit frustrating.
He's writing for children, both physically and, emotionally alike.
And
it's good to reinforce things.
Yeah.
It's good to reinforce things a little bit.
We're those kids in Punk Hazard. We're bigger than
right. This isn't like Chapter 1000 where I'm going to be thinking about it for years to come or anything.
Oh gosh.
But it's not a bad chapter, and we'll get into the ending, and I think we're going to have a nice discussion about the twist. But I guess we might as well talk about Neomads, because I also think the cover story's done.
Yes, and I think that's great. I think the whole idea of it is fun, because I think that it makes Germa 66 a little bit more exciting again, because it's kind of moving into another era. Like, it gives Judge and that crew like a nice sort of propulsion. It's kind of like the Cross Guild thing. It's like, okay, here are these characters that have been kind of stuck in place for a bit. We put them together. What happens? And the idea of like Caesar and Judge kind of coming together, that's chaos, and like that's like organized chaos, and I'm here for it.
Yeah, and I just, because this may be the last time we see him, and I haven't gotten into this much in this little podcast, I would like to say that I absolutely hate Caesar Clown, and I will be glad if this is in fact the last time we see him for a very long time. I hate this guy. Okay, I remember, like, Punk Hazard is one of those, is my problematic arc personally. I think it's great from a thematic sense. I think that it has exciting moments. But I really hate Caesar. I hate him as a villain.
I despise that entire arc. It's the only arc I've only read through once because I just can't. And I've only watched the anime version of it once. And that was enough.
I think I agree with you. I would rank this much lower than a lot of other arcs to be. And I forget
stuff that happened in the arc because it's been so long, and like people bring stuff up, and I'm like, oh yeah, that did happen in Punk Hazard, I guess.
Yeah, I'm a bit of a One Piece apologist. I don't believe there is a bad arc in One Piece. From a literal, just like hard quantifiable term, pretty much every single thing has been consistent. The thing about Punk Hazard that just kills me is that Caesar Clown is just the worst. He's the worst person. He's committed several of the worst crimes. He is an absolutely intolerable presence, and he feels like a discount Buggy. You know what I mean? He's supposed to be comic relief, but he is so not funny. Both in the
and you really like take a look at his actions, like what he did to those kids.
Yeah, he's again, those moral things. We've been talking a lot about science over the course of the second half of One Piece and ethics and things like that, and that's great because we have Chopper on the crew, and many times that has become the conflict for him. Great stuff. I love it. I just really hate this guy. And then they take him with them at the end, and then he's still there, and then he shows up in Whole Cake Island, and it's just like, I want to get rid of you.
It's one of my least favorite things about the New World's like arcs is that we just keep adding all of these like some pretty unlikable characters to the Straw Hat crew. And I mean, for a long time, I really did not like Kinemon. Like, really? and Momonosuke really bugged me. And I was just like, why do they have to be on the ship? And then you have Conjura, and it was just like, the Straw Hats could never just be, they could never just have their own space. It's like if we were in like Alabasta and like, for whatever reason, like Pell was with them and, okay.
I was literally going to say having Caesar around for like 5 straight arcs of this series is including the cover story that went through like all of Wano. I want to stress this. Him being around at all is like if before we hit Alabasta, Wapol was on the ship for some reason.
There you go. That's a good.
Like, it's the same thing, but we don't see Wapol enough to get sick of his crap. You know what I mean?
And ultimately, the only like major, I think, benefit that Caesar really added to like the later arcs there, like him still kicking around, was just mentoring Chopper, which is also kind of weird. But like just giving Chopper that sort of like, monster point upgrade, not giving him, but sort of inspiring him to like, level himself up. Which, to be honest, like you don't need Caesar to do that. Like you just need Chopper to be like, I want to do this, and just sort of pushing himself. I don't know, but the whole point.
They had another perfectly good doctor on the ship who could have done that for like 3 arcs. You know what I mean? Like
there you go.
Like Law is one of the best Devil Fruit users. Duh.
I think people do like how the series has never been super black and white. Luffy is not black and white with characters. Right. You can have the most despicable characters doing the most despicable things, but then they can sort of also be dimensional and have like layers to them. And it's like, okay, yeah, he's a scumbag, but it comes from this place of like, an almost healthy place of wanting to always pursue science and always wanting to like create things that change the world. And obviously his motivations are all out of whack beyond that.
I mean, you're absolutely right. I mean, case in point, we have Rob Lucci on our side now, and he's already making jokes.
An assassin. Yeah. Literally killed, innocent people. Yeah.
I just think Caesar is the least of those where it's a good, because again, and it's nice to know that there is a line, because you're right. One Piece doesn't just say, X person is completely evil. It doesn't really like playing that way. Luffy's idea of what good is very instinctual versus like a moral grounding. And that's great. I love that about a lot of these characters. I think Caesar's just the one where it doesn't hit as well for me.
He's a villain you don't love to hate.
It's drain. It really does feel like it's like a second attempt at Buggy, and it's just not nearly as entertaining as Buggy.
Yeah.
Just
I like that he's paired up with Judge at least, because Judge is still, I feel like there's a lot of potential there for that character. He's a kind of this pathetic dude that, you know, I think there's still a lot there, you know, for him.
Oh yeah. I mean, consider the fact that his little chapter story is him doing the exact same thing he was doing at the beginning when we first met him. He's getting into an alliance that he probably should know is going to lead to him getting stabbed in the back, and probably is not going to notice.
I'm assuming like whatever major war is coming, the Neo-Mads is going to be involved somehow, and I'm sure we'll get to all of that. I'm glad you mentioned, by the way, the whole thing of like the way Luffy decides somebody is good. There is this video on YouTube, Travis, and I don't think I sent it to you because I care about you as a human being, but it's 6 hours long. It's a 6 hour long One Piece video. Have you heard of it?
I've watched all of the Artur, True History stuff. That was
he broke those up though. I don't think there was he did that was 6 hours.
I've watched the collected version.
Oh, how long is that one? Because I just watched them piece by piece.
It's like 8 hours, and that's subtracting the recap.
Okay, well here's another one. It's 6 hours, and it is kind of interesting. And I only watched up through the point where he's really going over the East Bay saga. It's called a One Piece: A Modern Odyssey or something like that. Okay. And it's like he calls it like a literary analysis. It's kind of literary. It's not really, but whatever words. But he kind of talks about the way that like Luffy figures out. You know, he never asked somebody to be on his crew in that saga unless he's figured out that they're a good person, and so he kind of goes into depth on like how he determines what makes people good. It's pretty interesting. There's a little bit more depth that he's trying to like squeeze out of that orange or that tangerine than I think I personally did. I always kind of see Luffy as like this goof, reckless ball who doesn't really think anything through, but he makes an interesting argument that that's not really the case. So
he's extremely emotionally intelligent, and I'm glad that there's other people in the world that are willing to validate my very hot take that One Piece is a great modern fantasy in the lights of the Wheel of Time. You know what I mean? I've made those claims, and people think I'm nuts, but I am not.
I'm a big fan of Wheel of Time. I think One Piece is better in many, many ways. I think that like in terms of like our modern Odysseys, our modern like classics, I think like you have The Lord of the Rings and you have One Piece. You don't have a lot else, in my opinion. Like I think those are two like the biggest, of the modern, era, post-industrial age. Yeah, we are
really far off the track. But since you bring it up, I am very excited to see what happens in like 20 years after One Piece is done. What people who read it and are inspired to start creating. Yeah. You know what I mean?
Seriously. It's already inspired so many people, but okay, all right.
All right, yeah, we have sailed into the calm belt.
Bad sign. We're gonna sea beasts everywhere. Okay. So the first thing that happens in the chapter really is we have Stussy and Jinbei on the move. Where do you think they're going? Like we see them kind of running around. They're on the second floor of Building B. It's hard to keep a lot of this stuff straight, but I think like most of the action's happening Building A and C. And they're moving. And like the context of the scene is they're like, well, we need to evacuate and everything. Like Sentomaru seems to be taking care of that. But yeah, I guess I'm just kind of curious. Like, are they heading toward the same place that Sanji did, you think? Because Sanji like bolted out of there to go help Nami. Do you think that they're sort of just following him, or do you think, because we already have an indication that like Atlas's group is headed toward the trader, so then where would Jinbei and Stussy's characters go? Do you think they'll go to the same place? I don't know. I'm kind of like, do you think they're going to go help the Frankie? Like, I don't know.
I think pursuing Sanji sounds like the immediate answer, only because they're actually using the hover boots to fly, which haven't really been a thing people are doing too much until now.
Right.
So like again, we have a sense of urgency that we did not have a few chapters ago. And also
makes you wonder though if they trust. Well, do you think though that they trust Sanji enough to maybe, because if they hear the explosion of Pythagoras, wouldn't they fly over there?
It's very possible. It's one of these things where it's an interesting pairing that we have Stussy here with Jinbei, two famously government-aligned people who are not anymore for various reasons.
But also, like, Jinbei always, like, pairs off, or not always, but this is the second time Jinbei has paired off with, like, the mature female, person. Like, last time was with Robin on Onigashima, yeah.
Yeah, and I would, my guess is still going to stand that right now, as of like this panel in the time frame, it's probably pursuing Sanji, if only because we know Sanji is fighting S Shark, and we haven't really gotten Jinbei to process the existence of S Shark.
That's a good point. I guess I'm just worried. I'm worried about our boy Frankie. You know, what's he going to do?
I'm very worried about Frankie.
We'll get to that too, and I really want to talk to you about who you think might be the person calling out to S-Snake there, but we can move on, because a lot of this stuff that is established here is stuff that like the chapter really just sort of like drills in anyway. Like I was saying before, it's like, okay, like what's going to happen in this island is going to basically what's going to happen to O'Hara, but even more so, we get the revelation that, well, I think we already knew that communication systems are down. And I saw some people were sort of saying like, oh, you know, why don't the Straw Hats call the Grand Fleet for help? Like, is this the incident that the narrator references in terms of like what happens with the Straw Hat Grand Fleet, that they're going to get into something major? I don't think that's happening. I do not think that the Straw Hat Grand Fleet is showing up anytime soon. And that, part of that is because like they have no idea what's going on. Straw Hats aren't going to reach out to them. Straw Hats are kind of not arrogant right now, but I mean, I don't think that they're worried. Like, I don't think that they're on the back foot. So I don't think that they would look at the situation like they don't. If they hear like what's going on, they're just like, well, we're just going to escape, right?
This is an example of what we in the field like to call metagaming, which is where you start bringing in information that you have that the characters could not possibly have.
Exactly.
So Luffy,
and
is
even
not,
when things were dire and the characters knew everything was just wild, Onigashima, they didn't call the Grand Fleet then, and they could have. They didn't.
Yeah, they could have. They didn't, because they had alliances and everything. Here, I don't even think anyone, even the smarter members of the Straw Hats, have any idea of the scope of what is going on right now, which
Except
is a
for
part.
Jinbei.
Well, even with Jinbei, because that's a part of why we have to have the narrator come in and give us the actual scope of things. This is not something that just started happening when we showed up on the island. This is stuff that has been set in motion while we were in Wano.
Yeah.
So we're talking about things where they have stumbled into, yet again, some big world events by more or less accident.
It makes you wonder. It's like, what if, you know, Kid or Law had shown up and had gone in this direction instead? And what would have transpired? You know, it's a fun thought experiment, but, you know, obviously, like the way, you know, they're
do
doing
that for
is,
one of the other paths too. We were like, oh, what if Luffy had gone this way? And we had seen something like that. I think we had done that before, but yeah, it's I don't think they know the scale yet. So we know that crap is about to go down. We know how bad it's going to be. And they just don't. And again, we're trying to read ahead. We have this information. It helps us. But they just don't have it. And I don't. Okay. I'm going to get into this now. So one theory that I had kicking around that didn't click for me until, and again, it was a YouTuber. I don't even know which one to ascribe it to, so I apologize for kind of plagiarizing here. But they had pitched an idea that what happens here is something similar to what set up Impel Down in Marineford, in that someone ends up in world government custody that has to be retrieved. So this could be pick a Straw Hat, or in my particularly in their particularly like clever idea, it's Luffy willingly trading himself to get everybody else out. So
isolating Luffy from the Straw Hats, and
again, but this time the roles are reversed, and now the Straw Hats have to get him out. And that would be news enough. That would be news enough to spread to mobilize the Grand Fleet without needing to do some sort of big call to action. Which, let's be real, Luffy doesn't do that, you know, ahead of time. You know what I mean? He's a very in the moment character. So this, I don't think when the Grand Fleet re-enters the story, this necessarily has to be a thing that's coordinated by Luffy or by anybody else in the crew. I think this is something that can happen naturally.
I do agree with that. I'm kind of it's interesting because it's like I could sort of play it out in my head. It would actually make it more interesting if Luffy was split up from the gang, just because I like the idea of the Straw Hats going to Elbaf without him. I like that idea a lot.
If Shanks is still there and it's not time for Shanks to meet Luffy, we have to figure out a way to get one of those guys away from the island.
That's true, but he's on the way out, and I have the idea of like whoever's going to Elbaf, I think Shanks is going to be long gone. I think he's going to, mow down Kid like it's nothing, and then that's that. Like, if anything, I could see like Kid and his forces being stranded on Elbaf and having a run-in with the Straw Hats or something. Yeah. But whatever the case, I like the idea of the Straw Hats working together without their captain, and like something like that would be really interesting, actually. And it would sort of solve the problem of like Luffy's Gear 5th being such a code hack. At this point, we know that Luffy is strong enough to defeat, if at least like go toe to toe with like the strongest powers in the world. So like it has sort of like knocked some of the tension out of the story. It's made it feel like they can go anywhere, do anything, and that's great. But that's end game stuff that I think we need another beat. So that's interesting. I hope that you were able to figure out who came up with that theory so we can properly credit them.
I want to say it's Mr. Morge. Now that I'm thinking about it, I'm like pulling up my YouTube watch history.
I'm going to take back everything I said, and I'm going to become this theory's staunchest.
I'm gonna check my history and see.
One of these days, I'm going to apologize to him personally and say, "Look, I've talked a lot of crap about you. You didn't deserve it, and you're all right in my book."
I respect his commitment to the bit.
Oh, I respect him. I have nothing but respect for the guy. He just rubs me the wrong way. It's completely petty, and it's nothing. He did nothing wrong. He's fine. I'm sure he seems like a nice guy.
Yeah,
but I just have a hang up. It's me. I'm the problem. But anyway. So we just keep doing. What has this chapter done to us? Anyway, I don't know.
Where were we?
Well, so now we're at the part where Lilith and Usopp, they have still been Petrificus Catalysis or whatever. I only mention that because they literally say petrification. That made me think of Harry Potter. But regardless, Frankie is still half covered in stone. I know people are still speculating. Is it because he's a cyborg? Is it because she made contact with it? And that's like Boa's move. I don't think it matters, at least right now. But anyway, he's still like insisting that he can fight her, which seems unlikely. I think that Frankie doesn't stand a chance. Like, even if he had his full body, like maybe he could like hold his own a little bit. But I just think that the Seraphim is like too powerful for Frankie, which is, I've mentioned this before. I think that Oda kind of needed to give Frankie some like real obstacles, like really bring him down to earth a little bit, because he was becoming a little bit too like of like a game shark, the idea like he just cheat codes his way through everything in the story, which I love. He's super entertaining, a super fun character. But Pythagoras, is he dead? Pythagoras gets stepped on. He tries to find out who ordered Snake to do whatever, and then she just steps on him. It's brutal. And then we just see her walk away from an explosion, and it looks like Frankie's okay. Like we see him kind of like recoiling from it. But two things, like, is Pythagoras dead? And also, why was there such a huge explosion?
I was gonna be like, why the big? I mean, my guess is effect, just like to sell how powerful she is or anything like that. But I can't shake the feeling in the back of my mind, just this little nag in the back of my mind, that you had mentioned something before about fuel. Do we know what's powering these satellites? Is that a thing we know?
I don't think we know. I don't remember them mentioning it.
Curious.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, but that's the thing. Like, I was thinking that, but then I was like, well, Shaka got shot in the head by a gun the size of a cannon, and which we see in this at the end of this chapter. We see that like the character holding that gun is huge, and the gun is huge, and so that didn't happen to Shaka, which of course could mean that Shaka's not dead, and that a headshot wouldn't do the same thing. I don't know. But also, it's hard for me to tell if that explosion is from Pythagoras, because like it's hard to tell if the explosion is in front of or behind Snake, because we just see the shadow and we see a silhouette. It could be her back. If you zoom in a lot, like I don't think it's easy to tell. And if it is facing her from behind, she just stepped on him. It's possible, I think, that the explosion is from whoever's like calling on her to stop. Is that reasonable?
I mean, before you had mentioned it, I had just kind of autofilled Frankie being the one to do that. So the idea of it being someone else would be interesting.
I don't know why their entrance, like if they're gonna Kool-Aid man their way in, why would it be an explosion? I don't know. But I like another thing I like the idea of is that it having to be related to Bonnie and Kuma, because we do get like a little check-in with them later, and I just kind of want something to come from that, but I don't know what that would possibly be, because Bonnie's not exploding anything. I don't know. But I'm struggling to figure out like who this is. Like the first time I read it, I was like, oh, is this Atlas? Is there another traitor, right? Because I was kind of wondering, like, we'll get to it, but whoever the traitor is, York, they couldn't have done all this on their own. York was just there with them on the bridge. I don't know. There's just something suspicious about it to me.
Yeah, that's fair. That's fair. It's one of these things where, like, now that we have an answer, the question is, how do we feel about the other satellites now? Again, the question remains: is Shaka dead? You know what I mean?
York
it's
says
tricky.
He's dead. Which
this is One Piece, so
it's tough because, like, if it was any other character, I'd be like, yeah, whatever you say. But the Seraphim know each other. The satellites are connected to each other. They sync and they mind meld, which, yes, creates all kinds of other weird sort of, like, how are you going to explain this, Oda? Of how somebody was able to hide this, okay? But yeah, the idea that York would know Shaka well enough, right? It seems to me like she would just be like, oh yeah, he's not dead yet. Like, I don't know. Like, how could he hide that from her? Well, she hid something from him. I don't know. I keep going back and forth.
Yeah, it's so tough. It's so tough, and we'll talk about the actual twist. I'm sure here in a minute, but yeah. I just don't know where to put my finger down on any of this. We know that they're uploading to Punk Records. We don't necessarily know that they're downloading to Punk Records, or that the entirety of Punk Records could be scrubbed enough to pick up on something like that. So that's possible. I mean, you have to consider that Lilith is probably doing plenty of illicit things. One of the flashbacks we see, actually, she's in the background harassing a bunch of Cypherpole agents, and both Shaka and the Stella just are not fazed by it whatsoever. So it maybe they just didn't notice.
Yeah, I don't know. And another thing, I was like, well, could this be Stussy calling out for S-Snake to stop? But they were in building building B, which is on the other side. Like, they're so far away from this that I don't see how that would work. Yeah, I'm stumped on this one. I really am. And like, there's still the whole thing where, like, the cam snails were all taken out. How did York do that? Like, it just keeps leading me to believe that there's somebody else here, that maybe we just haven't put that piece together. I don't know. But hopefully we'll get an answer for that soon.
I mean, yeah, there's nothing that says that another satellite can't be in on this. Like, York is selling them a lie.
Ain't no rule in the rule book that says
Deus Ex Caribou is still running around. like, and he has to show up eventually. It's just, that is a rule.
He does have to show up. And I still, I'm bummed a little bit. I liked my little Seraphim theory that they were just kids having fun. I mean, that could always, like, play into it later, but I thought that was
great. I thought that was a great theory. I was cool, on board.
That's Oda for you. It's always got to be the most unpredictable, which sometimes is not, as satisfying as we want it to be. But that's why we're in the business. We gotta take the swings as we take them. Now, so the next thing we get is so Atlas, Robin, and Chopper heading over to this locked up lab. Now, the assumption I think a lot of us are making is that they are going to be heading to Vegapunk and York and Shaka if he's still alive. So this idea that apparently Atlas came to the same realization that Shaka did last week or the week before, whenever it was. But the thing I'm curious about, like, I keep, ever since it was mentioned that the satellites and Vegapunk were doing research on the Void Century and the Poneglyphs, Robin's right there. So if we're going to have that moment, if we're going to have that sort of like, hey, Robin, heard you're an archaeologist. Heard you're from O'Hara. How nice. Maybe we should trade some notes. Maybe we should kind of like, do you think that that's coming where there's going to be some kind of like sharing? I could see it happening after the Egghead incident and everything, but I'm just kind of curious if like that might get squeezed in here where all the chaos is happening.
It sure sounds like that was Shaka's original intent, with like validating Nico Robin's identity, with telling her what they already knew. It's interesting that for one, that they were doing this and not telling anybody. What a bombshell to drop still, but also that like the satellites keep forgetting about this location, this little old devil fruit research lab. Like, are they programmed to block it out of their minds? Is that where the secret research is? You know what I mean? Is the reason that Vegapunk ultimately went back to research the Void Century because we know he didn't do it, right away. Otherwise, something would have happened sooner, you would think. But like, is the reason he went back to that research because of his devil fruit research? Because those two things are tied together? And that's why the lab is like not a thing they talk about. Like that's very questionable. That's what I want to. I want that to there. I do want there to be a connection between that stuff, because not only do I think it fits, I think that it would nicely sort of like add focus to Vegapunk as a character and like what he's been working toward. It doesn't have to be. It's One Piece. Lots of things can be built up in this world, but I do like the idea of the poneglyphs being related in some way to the devil fruits, or Vegapunk arriving at that conclusion of like, in order for me to really crack the code on this, I do, want to know what happened in the Void Century. And there are a lot of great theories out there about how the Void Century could relate to devil fruits. I don't think we have a confirmation that there were devil fruits before the Void Century. I forget if that's the case. I think because I don't think Zoe, the elephant, I don't think that creature has a devil fruit that's been confirmed, and that even then they existed during the Void Century. We know they're older than the Void Century. I don't know, there's a lot you can throw in there, but that's kind of been my sort of like headcanon, is that whatever happened in the Void Century, whatever happened with Joy Boy and all that, has something to do with the devil fruits. That said, we have like the ancient mythical Zoans, which that could be from like even further and further because of like dinosaurs and everything. So who knows? Maybe devil fruits have just always been a part of this world, because the idea of them is that like if you wish for something, it manifests, right? So I don't know. I hope it comes into something eventually, but for the time being, I think the thing that like Robin probably needs to find out, that they probably have been working on, is like why the government is so cagey about this. The Vegapunk like group seems to have an idea, I think, of like why this information is dangerous. That's the road that I want to go down, because we're going to get the whole thing of like them uncovering like what the road poneglyphs do and like how they're going to get to Lodestar, do all that stuff. But in terms of like figuring out why would the government like send all this brutality, that connects to Robin's character, it connects to O'Hara. It's been referenced multiple times in this arc, right? It's been like last week and this week, like they're really drilling it in that like there's just something that the government is really scared of people finding out, that I think is either going to be like something we already knew, or like maybe it's something we knew about how what formed the world government and where all that stuff comes from, and maybe like add a wrinkle to that we're not expecting. That's my hope. Yeah, it's notable that we're not talking anymore about researching the poneglyphs specifically. We're talking about researching the Void Century. So they've learned something that Robin doesn't already know, and that's my thinking too. Yeah. That has to be what it is, because again, we're looking at a response that is several times over more than what was sent to O'Hara. We have that basically reinforced that what is going to happen now is going to make that look like small potatoes. So what could it possibly be? That's the big question, right?
Well, I think it could be the same thing that caused O'Hara, but like they're sending a bigger force because Egghead Island has so many more defenses.
It has weapons.
But I do have a feeling that like the researchers on O'Hara had uncovered something either related to this or the same thing, because that would make, I think, thematic sense, and it would work really well with like Robin's character kind of hitting a new stride in terms of like her resolution over like what's happened, right?
Yeah, and speaking of Ohara, that is the YouTuber who had the Luffy gets captured theory, by the way.
Okay.
I checked.
All right, that's cool. I could
so
see
that-
that.
so really-
I honestly, I do watch his videos, but I don't always finish them, and sometimes it's his editing style. It's a little bit too Gen Z for me. I'm an old cranker, and I have trouble.
Little bit too TikTok for you.
A little bit. I really like him too. He's really cool, and I think that he has really great insights. But yeah, for sure, I struggle a little bit sometimes to retain everything that he gets into. But
I forgot he made the video that I was referencing, so I feel yeah. Anyway,
but just to reiterate, he does good work. He does good work.
So speaking of all of this, though, I don't think what I want to say though is whatever Vegapunk has learned, I doubt it is everything. And the only reason that I feel that is because way back in Sabaody, Rayleigh made it clear that they didn't fully understand everything until they got to Laugh Tale. It was there that all the pieces finally came together. So I'm assuming that what they have found here is either something that is a hint to what the reality is, or
a puzzle piece.
And you'll remember this, I'm sure, that like what clued Roger's crew into there being another island to begin with was something that they found around Lodestar, if I remember right. Something tipped them off with that the Poneglyphs meant more. That there was more going on. There's the scene
where they have to go up to Lodestar in the boat, right?
Yeah.
And then they were the first to be like, no, this is not actually the final island.
Right. Something tipped them off. And it had to do with the Poneglyphs because they knew those were important to the situation. And that might be just because Voice of All Things, maybe not, but something tipped them off. And if we need Luffy to have that same tip off because they know the Road Poneglyphs are important because they were told they were important, but why they're important, what's on them, like what do all of these have to do with everything? What's the secret? Something has to tip it
off.
Yeah,
it could be like, oh, who wrote them?
That would even, and if it's be a start.
And that would give us something, and it wouldn't explain everything, but it would sort of like gear us toward like, okay, we know that Joy Boy wrote one of them, but who wrote, the Road Poneglyphs? I don't think we know that yet, right? So that would be an interesting sort of like, or even if it's not who wrote them, like why they were written, when they were written, something that differentiates them at least.
So,
but yeah, it could be anything. It could be like what they're made out of and like what the deal with that, or it could be a hint of that. Who knows?
So we do, the last time we had a mystery like this, it turns out the thing that broke that mystery wide open was learning the name of the place. And going back to Robin's flashback, the moment Clover is killed is when Clover almost speaks the name of the kingdom. So maybe even that's it. Just getting down to the brass tacks of the name and what that means could be something.
That's a good point. And also, I just want to put it out in the ether. I've always liked the idea. I don't know if I've ever heard this theorized by somebody else, but I've always liked the idea. For me, that the Poneglyphs are made out of like a stone that's from the moon. Because you know how much I love the moon, Travis. It could be Luffy's dream, for all we know, to go to the moon. Just to reiterate, because people are like, "Oh, John has theories about Luffy's dream." I do, and my top two are that he wants to go to the moon, or he wants everybody in the world to become a pirate. Those are my top two right now. Travis loves them. Travis messages me every day and is just like, "John, you're a genius. I don't laugh at you privately about this." Yeah.
Hey now. To be clear, as I've said before, anything that sounds just remotely childish enough could be Luffy's dream, and I will entertain it.
And Luffy's like, "Oh, the Poneglyphs made out of the moon. I want to go there." Okay, moving on. Okay, so Nami's looking after Edison. It looks like Edison's still alive. I was kind of curious if like Edison might be dead or like dying. It looks like Edison's okay, but I do think it's suspicious. If there is another character who is helping York, I would go to Edison first, and I would go to the idea that like Edison, maybe like Pythagoras, has another part of his body that he can control. So like seeing him here is sort of like a fake out, you know what I mean? Because he looks like he's offline. But yeah, I really, really like that idea of like, oh, he actually is like controlling Punk Records right now. It's just something I actually just thought of, where it's like, oh, what if he's like hardwired into Punk Records? That's how he turned off the cam sales, turned off the defenses, and did that. Like York is sort of like the mastermind, but maybe York is like using Edison and they're working together. I think that would be a cool reveal, and it would explain so much. But I Travis, you can go ahead and tell me I'm nonsense.
No, I don't think so. I think this is one of those where it's open-ended enough where we shouldn't just shoot anything down. We don't know what that stuff is made out of. You know, Egghead Island is an island where it really feels like anything could happen. Why wouldn't Vegapunk have a rocket to the moon, you know?
Mm-hmm. And I mean, that's the thing, is like Edison's very smart. But, you know, if York wants to be Celestial Dragon, is questioning, you know, why there are multiple Vegapunks, like, I don't know. Well, I'll save that for like when we get to the York stuff. Real quick, I'll mention, why didn't Brook go into ghost mode earlier? I feel like he could cover way more ground that way. And like, it seems kind of odd to me that he's only just now doing that, because, maybe he just wanted one of the satellites to guide him, but he can go through walls. I don't know. I find it strange.
That's one of those ones, again, it's kind of metagaming, right? Like, why didn't Luffy go, you know, gear 5th automatically? Because he doesn't know if he needs to. In the case of Brook, I don't think that they really had an idea that Stella was captured right away until things started happening. When they all left the room to go look, it was way more casual than what things are right now. The second they were separated, that's when stuff started happening. And I think that's important to understand. Brook didn't need to go all ghost form because, honestly, this was a casual stroll, and he kind of still needs to catch up on what's going on to begin with. You know, there was a whole joking moment about how Zoro can't go off on his own, and we reinforced that with a second version of that joke. It's One Piece is one joke, and it is, unlike the actual one joke, funny all the time. And he, you know, and now he's roaming the halls. So of course, you know, we've broken that rule already, but. Yeah, I think this is just one of those things where it's like, if they don't feel the need themselves as characters to do it, they're not going to do it. And Brook is a pretty lackadaisical character anyway. But at this point, yeah, he's in a situation where he's not helping being around and being a broken skeleton, so he might as well go do something and be useful.
I think that's all fair. And then that makes me wonder then, like, where he's going to go. Is he also going to go to the lab? Is he going to meet up with Atlas and them? My thinking is that he's probably going to like help communicate, you know, maybe run into Zoro, like inform characters of what's going on, mediate, since they don't have any communication. Oda can use Brook, you know, use his power to keep the Straw Hats somewhat connected, possibly. But who knows? He could also run into Caribou. He could also run into, you know, whoever, you know, is reaching out to S-Snake right now. Who knows? But I do think that it is interesting that they are in the same building. Like, they're right below what's going on with S-Bear and S-Hawk. Oda gives us that nifty little, you know, map. But literally, like, they're right where S-Hawk is supposedly going. And so if S-Shark is fighting Sanji right now, and Brook is going off, if S-Hawk comes down, Sanji probably can't fight Hawk, and so that could also, you know, lead to like Jinbei showing up, and then maybe there's a big clash in building A, the third floor. I could see that happening. And I do want to mention, Sanji gets punched by S-Shark and says basically that it doesn't affect him at all because the power of love or whatever. Some people have been like, because he's part Lunarian, and I'm like, I don't know, I guess it's just the Germa 66 exoskeleton. And I'm starting to find, like, I don't dislike the whole Sanji is part Lunarian, but people are really starting to like ride that into the ground, is my opinion.
It's power scaling. It's always, when you're trying to figure out why somebody's obsessed with a Zoro or a Sanji thing, it is 110% power scaling. If Sanji's half Lunarian, that puts him back on par with Zoro in these people's eyes, because Zoro went toes with King and only barely made it out of that, you know. That's kind of what I think this is coming from, is they still need to find a way to like elevate the playing field, as if,
and he doesn't need to.
Matters.
He's always been better as an underdog. Like, he just like he's not Zoro. He's not the same level as Zoro. He doesn't need to be. He's Sanji. But, and also, like, I don't mind the idea that like the Lunarian thing comes in from like Judge like using something with Lunarians to help form like his kids, I guess, but I would assume it'd be like certainly like a modified version that's not as powerful because he's Judge, not Vegapunk. But
it's
what do I know?
You know, I'm gonna do a little thing we like to call reading comprehension. You know, as always, the big enemy of all One Piece theorists. Sanji calls it the power of love because that's the thing that separates him from Germa. He has the capacity to feel affection towards people, sometimes warranted, sometimes not. And because he can feel that way, he can access these powers without losing that sense of emotion. That's what makes him different. That's what makes him a more complete version of what Judge was trying to make in the first place. That's what his whole little mini arc during Wano is about. That's what his whole flashback during Whole Cake is about. It's about separating out that, like, hey, Sanji went through these same processes, but he's never really had access to this power because he's rejected it so hard in favor of those emotions. And now that he is a more mature and grown person over the course of this journey, now he can have access to that power without losing himself. That's what, and he doesn't want to be tied to Germa. He doesn't want to credit Judge for this. So he goes back to his old default. To him, this, you know, he's completely rewritten his own history in his mind. It is the power of love that fuels him. It makes him, his love for his crew makes him willing to tap into the powers that he would rather not have. Yeah. So, I mean, come on.
If I can jump off that too, if there's one thing I appreciate about this arc compared to Wano in particular, but also like Wano, Zoe to an extent, and Whole Cake Island and Dressrosa, those arcs, like, we really didn't have a lot of this extra characterization for all the Straw Hats. A lot of the Straw Hats fell into the background. If you had Zoro kind of being the focus, Sanji wasn't there. If Sanji was the focus, Zoro's nowhere to be found. I've really liked that in Egghead, we've gone back to basics a little bit, and we've found time to really give the Straw Hats like little moments. Not everyone hasn't had equal treatment, but you know there has been a little bit of a feeling like this is a cohesive crew, and I appreciate that. Even on the brink of you mentioning like, what if Luffy's not there anymore? Like, what if he goes away? But I like that idea still. It's just kind of, you know, silly, but it's silly to think that like they could get split again, and that would be echoing other arcs. Okay, so let's talk about then Zoro and Luffy trying to get the flames out. So I had a thought about this. Like, they've been fighting Esper and S-Hawk. They've been waiting for the flames to go out so that they become vulnerable, right? As Zoro mentioned last week. But I guess, like, is it that King, like, why do you think King let his flames die out? I'm of two minds of this, because, like, on the one hand, the Seraphim are sort of like so robotic. They have tactics. Maybe they're just a little bit smarter. Maybe they're just like, oh yeah, we're resilient. Like, you know, we'll be fine mentally. And maybe King just like lost his cool because his like mask got chipped away and he freaked out and got really upset. Maybe also, I think it's worth pointing out that King fought what's his name? Marco the Phoenix. He fought him like pretty rigorously and was like certainly not like at his like tip top shape when he was fighting Zoro. Obviously Zoro wasn't either. So I'm wondering if that had something to do with it. He was so worn down that like he had to extinguish his flames just so that he could use that like extra speed to keep up with Zoro. What do you think?
So, and I'm double checking this because honestly, it was a while ago, and I need to make sure I know what I'm talking about here. So my understanding of this is that King was more, I want to say, like, after he uses, it's almost like fuel, where like he uses a powerful attack, like he's more invulnerable when the flames are on, but he's more aggressive and has a higher attack output. I'm putting this in video games terms. When the flames are out, it's basically a boss tell, right? That's kind of...
It's like going Super Saiyan. It just upgrades everything, but like it drains... Maybe like you could say like it drains him, like, you know,
right,
I don't know.
Here it is. He gets faster, but his defense decreases. So he's trying to go for the kill quickly. And so he's willing to take his shields down in order to do that. It's a trade-off in power. With the Seraphim, do they need to do that? I guess is the question. Has that been a thing they need to do? I know some people have theorized as well that it's using, like, because of the genetic modifications, it's actually when they use the devil fruit powers that they have from the green blood, which...
Yeah, I was about to mention that because they do have that, and I'm hoping we get to a point where, like, that is like, if it is a limited resource, like, I think Oda should call that out soon. If it's not, then it's not. But I still keep coming back to, like, they just seem a little bit too, like, monstrous for, like, what they are.
Yeah, it's one of those things. And again, I don't know that they're necessarily supposed to win against the Seraphim. It really feels like right now their job is to keep the big monster guys busy long enough to allow certain things to play out. You know, it's probably no surprise that we now have 3 Seraphim fighting the monster trio, right this second, where they can't intervene.
Jinbei has room. Yeah, Jinbei can fight one of them.
Yeah, Jinbei, until he sees one that looks like him and he has feelings about it because he's the oldest, he's the dad of the group, and, like, the
son he never had.
Well, yeah, you know how he feels about his people. So, like, this idea of, like, a version of him that gets a chance to live a better life, like, that's not going to mess Jinbei up? No. Are you kidding?
Who knows? I mean, they could put him up against S-Snake. I mean, we don't know yet. I mean, it is a little out of the way.
Jinbei is the one who's formal enough where, like, her crap probably wouldn't work either. Because, like, that's the other thing. Yeah. So far, she's been up against some pretty doofy Straw Hats. Let's be honest. I love Usopp. He's my favorite. He's a doofus. So, it makes a modicum of sense that maybe that's what it takes, is somebody who just can't be charmed by her. And Stussy and Jinbei would be probably the 2 characters who could do that.
Maybe. Regarding Lucci here, he mentions the thing, like, he understands that the Seraphim have assassination priorities, and, like, look, he's more aware of how the Seraphim work because he's with the world government. But I do want to kind of point out something I really like about Oda's style of, like, one of the things I think that he's best at is always remembering who his characters are and, like, giving them functioning dialogue that fits his world, because, like, so easily could this sort of thing be played off as a joke, or, like, maybe Zoro says, like, oh, maybe he did it. But no, Oda uses it as a chance to add a little bit of an extra layer to Rob Lucci, give us some information on how he thinks, how he interprets situations and thinks quickly. Like, it's good characterization. It's good sort of, like, give all the characters something to do. It's kind of related to what I was saying before, but yeah, I just want to point that out. I think that it is something that, if people are curious, like, man, why do I like this? It's like, I think that's one of the reasons, is because you fall in love with characters, even the bad characters, like the evil ones, because you just always feel like they exist in a world that makes sense, and, like, the things they do kind of fit what's going on. I think that that's important to point out. So yeah.
Yeah, no, it's probably the single biggest thing about One Piece that just immediately stands out, is that these are very rich characters, side characters that Oda has thought a lot about over time. Even if we don't get to see everything about them, they all have histories. Like, sometimes his SBS histories are definitely jokes, and he's making it up as he goes. But when people ask for stuff like Kid's backstory, he's written that stuff down. He lets that inform the character, even if it's not being spoken actively. And you're right, this Lucci example is a great example of that.
I know we got to keep moving through it, but I also kind of wonder, like, how come he's not really using Rio? Like, he's not really using the hockey that, like, can, like, crush these Seraphim from the inside. I don't know. I find it kind of weird that he hasn't even been shown to try that. But no, he does hog Gatling again, and, like, Lucci's like, oh, what do you? And we also have him, like, calling Kaku Usopp, which is a fun reference to Water 7 that happened a bunch. And so yeah, there's the whole splitting up there. It's fun.
I mean, it's a great reminder of Luffy's character, how he views people. If he don't know your name and you're not worth his time to learn your name, you get a nickname. Kaku, his nickname is just Usopp. It just is. It's just, that's your name until you've earned enough of my respect to get your actual name. Love that about Luffy. It's always funny. We should get into the thing, huh?
Well, I'm kind of curious because we have this so the narrator comes in and is like, this has been a record of the events before the day of the famous Egghead incident, but its course was set in motion 3 months prior. So the incident hasn't happened yet. The narrator also says later that the resolution of the incident is the following day. So it's something that's going to happen soon. It's going to happen within the next 24 hours, and it's going to resolve. And again, I like the idea, like the incident is, Luffy handing himself over to the government or something. But also, there is this thing, like this has been a record of the events. And I know we've been sort of just like saying it's Oda. Oda's the narrator. Narrator has been invoked like this. But I am kind of curious, like that choice of words, this has been a record. Like somebody's keeping track of what's going on. It feels a little bit like that has some connection. Like it makes me wonder, like, why are we seeing Bonnie here? It has something to do with, maybe this has something to do with memories. Maybe this has something to do with like the narrator is like really looking at this holistically. Maybe the clue of like the incident has to do with Kuma. I haven't really given that a ton of thought yet.
I have a theory on that too.
Well, please, by all means.
It ties into the very end of the chapter, like literally the last line from Vegapunk, the Stella Vegapunk.
Okay, we'll hold off on that for now then. We'll hold off then and then go through. I mean, I don't love the next couple panels, I guess. I mean, so we just get the sort of like we go to Mary's Joa, the trader calls them and it's just like Dr. Vegapunk studying the Void Century. We already kind of went over this. It's just sort of like confirming that, yes, like this was all set in motion ages ago. And this is what's going on. We see a few like Marine naval commanders. They look like vice admirals to me.
Yes.
I didn't recognize any of them. Did you?
So one of them is Dahl for sure. And somebody else pegged the guy with glasses, and I cannot remember his friggin' name now. But he's someone we've seen before. The other two are not familiar to me.
Yeah, not familiar to me either. One of them almost kind of looks like a female Katakuri.
Yeah, sure. I'm pretty sure that's Dahl, actually. It's hard to tell with the text box there, but I'm pretty sure that's Dahl.
When I first saw her, I was like, I don't know. I mean, it has been a while, but and that other guy looks like he has like Doflamingo glasses. But anyway, and then they like it's basically like recapping at that point of like, oh yeah, and then Luffy showed up and they're literally laughing on the ship. It's funny actually. And then we see of course Akainu who is super upset about this, and the Gorosei is just like, seriously again. But then here comes the important part. The resolution of this incident the following day would inflict a kind of shock the world never saw coming, which kind of gets into why people have been assuming that this has something to do with the Grand Fleet, because that's kind of echoes the Grand Fleet causing some sort of incident. But as we've already established, it doesn't look like that is exactly what's going on here, what we're really headed toward, but we're going to find out soon. And then we can just jump to it from there. Vegapunk is like, this is all you're doing. And then sure enough, it's York. York comes in and says the world only needs one Dr. Vegapunk. I'm going to be a celestial dragon. Obviously, like the first thing I messaged you, Travis, about this was lame. Just lame. Lame with 4 L's. To me, it's still, and I know people are trying to be like this. Wow, it really was unpredictable. Like, wow, Oda. And I'm just like, it's not satisfying. At least not right now. I gotta be honest. But how do you feel?
I told you, murder mysteries are extremely hard to nail. Even for somebody who's really good at payoff, it's really hard to nail a good mystery ending. I will say that going back over the past few chapters and, taking notes, looking it over and everything, it fits. It's believable. I don't need the mystery to be unpredictable. I need it to be the reverse. I need it to be something that's plausible, that if I go back and look for the proper clues, now that I know what the ending is, I can piece this together. And
I said that a little bit. I don't know. And then some people were like, well, when they're looking at the cameras and she's the 6th Vegapunk, and, on the camera, it's the door says 6 when he's like, who's doing this?
It's the,
and I'm like, okay,
it's the more obvious stuff. It's what is York the Vegapunk of?
Greed
or desire.
Which that's the thing. Is like we didn't really
translation. It's desire. So that's important because Lilith tells us at the very beginning, you can't control the desire of living beings. It's right up front there. So if York is the shaved off part of Vegapunk's desires, amplified to the we talked about this last week, amplified to the extreme of a full body without having the full context of emotions. This just makes sense. This is even more so than the evil one. This one just makes sense because they don't really have a scope of morality in the same way.
So I'm not saying it doesn't make sense, because sure. But then also, like, to me, it's like, then why, like, Lilith is supposed to be the one who's evil, but like, she hasn't really been evil. And I guess that's what you're saying. It's just like, well, what is good? What is evil? Atlas has been wrath, but Atlas doesn't really show wrath. It's just weird to me that, like, I mean, I guess the idea you're saying is that, like, desire is apparently more powerful than those other aspects. Is that the
idea? It's more of just like, these are more benign than we've really tried to afford them. We have a hard time getting a read on Shaka, for example. We've had a really hard time trying to parse him because he's one aspect of a character. And I think this is just another aspect of a single character being shaved off and amplified. But I also feel like we're missing something, which brings me to the
That's where I'm at.
Yeah, we're missing something. And that brings me to the Stella's reaction to this, which is to say, you went to Mary Joa years ago, and you really want to be one of those ghastly, horrid people. Kuma. This is the thread that connects the two plots right here. Because we know when Vegapunk was in the Holy Land, we have a cover story telling us exactly when it happened. And we just so happen to have the Elder Stars shrouded in the background to try to fudge exactly what the timeline might have been for that happening. But Vegapunk himself is young comparatively, so I think we know when that might have happened. And if he was there when whatever big tragedy befell Kuma, I think this is where we tie the knot between these different plot lines. I think this is it. Whatever York saw, and let's be clear, because she's just an aspect of Vegapunk, it doesn't mean York had to physically be there. It's possible that Vegapunk, a character that we know himself has a very complicated moral center, he says right here that he thinks that the world nobles are ghastly people, but has no problem building them Terminators. Because it helps him do other things. He's kind of operating on the road to the road to hell is paved with good intentions kind of thing. Like he's kind of weighing the good over the bad. So it is possible that door has been left open this whole time. Like a little teeny tiny part of him possibly desires having the power to do whatever he wants without having to make compromises or deals. What if he just had that power himself? He doesn't have to believe in it. He doesn't have to be a thought that he's had for more than a second, but it could be enough to tease that little desire in his heart, because it doesn't have to be on a moral scale. That's just a creature of desire, of greed. So why wouldn't they want all the power? And again, I think whatever it is, whatever they saw there, involved Kuma for one, and for two, set that desire in motion, which might be why it didn't get picked up by Punk Records. That's where I'm at. I don't know exactly what it is, but I think we started with Bonnie crying in Kuma's memory, and we end with this. I think these two things are meant to go together.
I don't know if I buy it, only because of the timelines. Timelines are kind of throwing me off.
It's hard to pin it down exactly, admittedly.
Because when you mentioned, Vegapunk, when he visits the Gorosei, I think that is like the first time that he's in Mary Joa, but he has dark hair. And in chapter 1072, that's when he is talking to Kuma, and Kuma is still like, he's not like all messed up yet. But at that point, Vegapunk has white hair and everything. He's not
right. What I'm saying is a lot of time could pass, because we know Kuma was young when he was in his flashback memory.
Oh, but I thought you were saying that like what happened to Kuma would have been when Vegapunk had like dark hair and was at Mary Joa.
Yeah, because he would have been younger. They both would have been.
You mean the tragic thing, like the god? Maybe.
Yeah.
Oh, I thought you were talking about like whenever Kuma like lost his humanity.
No, I mean what Bonnie is witnessing right now. Whatever is causing her to cry, is also the thing that makes Vegapunk think that the world nobles are ghastly. That whatever they witnessed, I think they witnessed the same thing, if that makes sense. I just hit my microphone. I'm sorry. Talking with my hands. I think they witnessed the same thing. Something happening with Kuma.
So then, okay. So then if that's the idea, then you're thinking that, like, when would York, do you think this is when York was in Mary Joa, or you think York and the other satellites, because I've been assuming that they aren't that old, that they haven't been around that long.
So like I said, it's not, they're all aspects of Vegapunk, so that doesn't mean they had to be, I mean, he could be talking to her as himself. I mean, that's basically what he's doing. He
says you went.
Yeah, I'm not saying it's perfect. I'm saying I'm saying it's not necessarily a requirement that York had to be there, physically, because they're all doing it. It's like you said. How did nobody else notice? They're all doing it at the same time.
I'm just skeptical. I guess like it just feels like Oda's trying to say that at one point Vegapunk brought the satellites to Mary Joa.
That's also very possible. It's,
which if he did, I do think that is kind of weird. Like, why would he do that? Would he, I don't know, if he wanted protection? But at this point, we haven't really seen the satellites be all that powerful.
It's a demonstration, isn't it? So alternatively, if I'm wrong, and he takes them at a different time, it's to demonstrate to the Gorosei that he can, in fact, make a sentient robot. And
like the pacifistas. Yeah, oh, do you think this could have been the precursor to the pacifistas? Now that's what could connect to Kuma. Would then connect to because Kuma. That's the kind of technology. If he's able to take aspects of himself and put it into androids,
then he could do the opposite.
That's what they did with Kuma with the pacifistas. Yeah. There we go. Okay, we figured we got there.
That could do it.
I feel like people probably called this ages ago too, but it's one of those things.
It's one of those things where, again, we clearly don't have all the pieces. There's probably stuff.
we're just still trying to find Lodestar. We're nowhere close. We're a log town.
But I think we do have to tie those plot lines together. We have a lot of loose threads, and we need to start tying those together as a part of this, because now we have a clock. Now we're talking about a full day of One Piece, which could be 5 years of content.
It's Dressrosa time.
Wano took place over Act 3 alone of Wano took place over a single night. So, we could be here for a while. I don't think we're going to be there for a long time, only because I think Oda is cognizant of the fact that he needs to get somewhere soon. But, we're not 2 chapters away from things going south. You know what I mean? This is the next year of One Piece, I think. And there's going to be a lot more to show off, but I feel like I'm going to be going back to that one panel of Vegapunk saying that over and over again until we get it answered.
I like the part where, and real quick, I'll say, so far, I mean, this is only 20 chapters in, Egghead. Right, Egghead started with I think 1058, and it's definitely not I think it'd be a Wano arc. Obviously, I don't think it's gonna be over 100 chapters or anything. But I do think that we're looking at like a chapter, like we're looking at an arc that'll probably be like 30 to 40 chapters. We'll see, but that's my thinking. That's pushing it. Like I could see this be just like 28 to 30 chapters. Who knows?
I would have said that last week. I don't know if...
Oh, you think that I don't know, because I do wonder if because we do have the Kuma stuff to sort out. I do think we're going to hop around a bit. So maybe 40 is this. I could see this being the halfway point. Maybe it is around 40 chapters. I would say we're at a
halfway point more than we are. Because I think, especially if we're going to be doing conflict now, if we're going to be doing battles and stuff, we're going to be doing the traditional Oda jumping between fights kind of situation. We're gonna.
Yeah, I just don't think that the battles against the Seraphim are going to be
right. I don't think they're. I don't think they're meant to actually win. I think they're meant to be distractions more than anything else.
Mm-hmm.
But if we
exactly, which is why I think that the pieces can all sort of move around quickly at this point. And I don't think that we have to have these
more
major
pieces than normal too. So it's one of those things where I feel like at this point we're probably this is 2023. This is the rest of 2023 at the least. Probably a little bit into 2024.
2 things on York. I agree with her when she says it's so complicated when everyone is Vegapunk. Very true. But also on a more serious note, I guess. I also like the thing that I do kind of like about her being the traitor. It's not that I'm totally against it. The thing that I'm against is that like we just really didn't spend any time with this characters. It's kind of frustrating. It's like, well, you know, if she was the traitor, it would have been nice to have a little bit more, I don't know, information or characterization or have her do anything. But she hasn't. She's been in the background a lot. But I do like the idea behind, because you mentioned the desire stuff, like I do like the idea that like the one Vegapunk who would kind of want to betray them all is the one who eats and sleeps and poops for them. And I think that there's something kind of poetic about that. There's something that does kind of speak to like that gluttony being a very celestial dragon sort of thing, because that's all they do. So I like, again, like I like the motivation. I like the sort of like the theory of York once it's actually been put out there. The thing I don't like is the lead up. I just think the lead up just, I don't think it's a very satisfying like build to set up to pay off.
I think,
but that's why I'm hoping that next week, like there's more to it.
If I may put my dirty commie hat back on here real quick, I wonder if Oda is trying to say something about someone feeling disrespect for their menial labor going unrecognized while the others get praised for all of their shenanigans. So
you're saying York wants to own the means of production?
Possibly. I don't think that that's actually true, because then York would not be the enemy. So Oda does not come off as a he's not anti-communist. That's for sure.
I would say, you know, like without us trying to like create a bunch of metaphors here, I kind of think that York is a character, the idea of like an evil character only being motivated by consumption, sure, yeah, that we can sort of point out that might be a little bit more American to, but like York is like the first real American One Piece character. Maybe.
She's our bandit, Keith.
And that's the chapter.
We did it.
It's a great chapter in terms of just moving things along, giving the fans what they wanted in terms of like progression. It's a sloppy chapter in some ways, I think, but not aggressively so. We get a few more questions, but we do get some answers, which I appreciate. And so, yeah, I'll stop fussing.
Fair enough. I do want to ask you one more question, since we're here and we don't know the next time we're going to get a visit from this character, I'll say.
Okay.
Do you think the narrator is in the story?
Yes. That's kind of what I was getting at before. I kind of think that this isn't Oda. I kind of think that this is a character talking about something, referencing something, who knows. But yeah, I just have a feeling. That's that word choice.
It's interesting just because we have the narrator back just right after the SBS, where Oda kind of answers the question of if the newer Straw Hat members have been apprised of the stories of the other crew members. Like, do they ever have a sit down around a barrel and like commiserate over their backstories? And Oda kind of gives the non-answer of, well, it depends who you ask, kind of thing. It's what, it makes you wonder, because like Robin sounds like an obvious answer to this, right? Robin is on, we know that they're keeping kind of a log on the ship and everything. Is it that? Mm-hmm. The narrator has information that not anyone else has, obviously, at least in the present moment. I'm just curious who would be best, like what would be satisfying if we learned that at the end? Who would be the best narrator?
Well, my thought would be Yamato. Because that was the function that I assumed Yamato would fulfill when he joins the crew and is like not the archaeologist, doing what Odin did, because Yamato is Odin, right? And what was Odin's function? Odin's function was like the diary. and, you know, creating a record of all of the adventures that he went on with the Roger Pirates. So that's why that was one of the major reasons why I was so bummed Yamato wasn't going to be on the crew, because I was like, that's such a great function for him. That's such a great sort of way to bring the Straw Hats in on their adventures, and to be the person who does kind of like a little bit of a fanboy of the Straw Hats, right? Not Bartolomeo level, but close, and be able to sort of like prompt them into sharing more about their lives. Because like, yeah, I mean, I'm sure there's plenty of stuff, like Usopp talks a lot. I'm sure there's been a little bit of chatter around the mead, but there's plenty of things that I'm sure the Straw Hats haven't mentioned. Like they didn't talk about, they were probably on the ship for a few days getting to Egghead, and they didn't know about Zoro's fight with King that just happened. Like he didn't talk about it. He didn't tell them about like what King did, you know. Like they don't care. They just party. They hang out. Like, what, you know, they're not doing like a ESPN, you know, like after the game, like, you know, like, hey, all right, coach, like, well, let's go over the plays. Like, no, it's the Straw Hats. Yeah. But Yamato would be that kind of character who was just like nerdy about that sort of thing.
I had never considered that, actually. That's a good point.
Yamato's like the envoy or the diplomat, the ambassador. Like that. Yeah,
I mean, I'd always thought of Odin on Roger's crew as simply like the guide or the resident Chad, possibly. But
hey, that too.
Which Yamato could absolutely also fill. But yeah, you know, speaking of characters who have information that they otherwise wouldn't, Yamato is a great example of that. They just do.
Yeah. But also, every straw hat has two functions, right? They don't just have one thing about them. So like Luffy's the captain, but he's also like, I don't want to say the hero, but he's sort of like he's also kind of like the cabin boy. He's a little bit of like a mischief troublemaker. You have like, and Chopper isn't just the doctor. Chopper is like the little brother, the kid. Nami isn't just, you know, the navigator. She's also the burglar, the thief. You know, everybody has like a second thing to them. Like just look at Zoro and Sanji are like the wings or the arms of the captain. Jinbei is not just the helmsman, but also the elder statesman. What would Yamato have been? I think like Yamato would have been, yeah, like that kind of like the documentarian, like the person who records everything that's happening, but then also the person who you know, is the storyteller. Or you could also throw in like the ambassador to Wano, whatever it is.
Yeah, that's a really good thought. And I think, you know, Yamato is a character that we will revisit. I think a lot of our Wano friends will be revisiting sooner rather than later. But yeah, I mean, that's a good idea. I like that a lot. I really had not given that thought before. Very cool.
And then when people are just like, Carrot should have joined the crew. What would Carrot have done? The Lookout. Okay, what else? She would have gone
no. See, the Straw Hats already have a scout. His name is Luffy.
Yeah, he's a lookout.
That's why he sits on the front of the boat. Which I had to. I want to give you an update just for the listeners, and I know we're making this episode long, but I would like to update you and tell you that Evan has in fact finished the East Blue. And
wow. I thought you were going to say he's finished the whole thing.
No. They released two Metroid games in the past like 2 weeks, so he has other priorities. But
fair enough. Do we know Allie's progress?
She is firmly on the Barati as of my last check, and she's firmly doesn't like most of the characters yet. So her last tweet on the issue was Patty is the MVP right now, just to give you an idea of where her headspace is at. So there's that. But Evan did ask me how, because he sent me a picture. He's reading the actual physical volumes, and he sent me a picture of the SBS where Oda explains where everybody's cabins are on the Going Merry, and Luffy's cabin is very specifically pointed at the masthead, and he just sent me a picture of that with the word "how," and I'm just like, what are you talking about? I see nothing wrong with this image. Like,
it's very Luffy, isn't it?
He is the close.
I mean, isn't there in the anime after the Alabasta arc? There's like the whole thing where like Robin gets everybody to come out to watch the stars in the outro.
Yeah,
remember that?
And
It's one of my favorites. I think they play it during Skypiea, but don't they show like Luffy sleeping in in the ship, like
he
on a
actually
hammock or
sleeps
something
in the ship in the anime. Like they're when Oda says it's his cabin, what he means is when Luffy talks about it being his spot. And the way that I've always understood that, and this is why I make the joke about him being the scout, is that Luffy is so passionate about the adventure that as much as he loves his ship, as much as he loves his crew, the thing that really draws him in his soul is that sense of adventure, that that sense of romance. And so he has to sit literally the closest he can get to the next island the whole time. He has to be as close to the adventure as possible, and so he has to sit on the masthead of the ship. It's the closest he can get. So I sometimes jokingly call him the scout. He would be the lookout.
Well, the next chapter is going to be coming out in just 6 days from when we are recording this, depending on when you're listening. We don't have a break, basically, and so we will, of course, be back soon to talk about chapter 1079. I have a feeling it's going to be a wild one, but until then, Travis, it's been fun talking to you about One Piece. They should just call it Fun Piece, at least when we're talking about it on Rookie Pirate Radio, I think.
I'm just going to laugh at the pun. Thank you as always.
And we'll be back soon. Thank you as always for listening to our show, Rookie Pirate Radio. And again, if you have anything you want to add to the discussion, if something we said inspired an idea you have a theory that you want to point us toward, anything, any questions, or if we said something wrong, especially, again, our email is rookiepirateradio@gmail.com, and our Discord server is linked in the show notes. All you have to do is click on that, join our Discord. You'll find the One Piece spoilers chat where you can hang out with us there. Spoiler rules are pretty simple. Just let us know, do a little spoiler tag. Let us know what chapter you're referencing, and then you're good to go. And hope to see you all there on the next one. See you, everybody.